Nowadays, gaining celebrity status from wearing rubber isn't too uncommon. Hell, just take a look at some of the Twitter pages for some of the top latex fetish models. However, I'm going way back in time to the late 1800s. During this time, there were a few people who gained celebrity status from rubber, such as Charles Goodyear and Charles McIntosh. While their successes in scientific discovery and the economic production of rubber goods are certainly noteworthy, I'm looking at someone who became famous simply from wearing rubber clothing. And to that, I bestow the honor of the first rubber celebrity to Irish explorer Captain Paul Boyton back in the late 1800s. Our story begins in 1872, when inventor Clark S. Merriman created the first ever rubber survival suit, also called an immersion suit. This suit was marketed to sailors as a form of protection from hypothermia and rough seas should the user's boat become capsized in cold water. The full coverage suit allowed the wearer to be totally dry, while providing buoyancy from 5 air pouches inflated with a mouth hose. The wearer could then float on their back and use a paddle to move around with ease, almost like a rubber kayak. Looking at the original patent, issued July 16, 1872, the object of my intention is to provide a waterproof, life-saving dress, sufficiently lined with air to sustain the weight required, while the limbs are allowed full freedom of action in swimming, and vital heat is retained in the body. Here we see a modern survival suit. Survival suits nowadays use a variety of modern fabrics such as neoprene and Gore-Tex, allowing for much more maneuverability and better containment of heat. However, when the survival suit was first introduced, Merriman had trouble advertising its benefits to ocean liner companies and governments' navies. This is until Paul Boyton came along. To say the least, Paul is a complete badass, and I'm really surprised he isn't better known in the rubber community. Paul began using the rubber survival suits to go on quite amazing expeditions. He was dedicated in pushing these suits to their limits, testing to see which conditions the suit would still work properly. In total, Paul would travel about 25,000 miles of oceans, rivers, and lakes using only his rubber suit. Paul's adventures began in October of 1874, 250 miles off the coast of New York in the North Atlantic. During this trial, Paul jumped overboard into the frigid waters where he floated for over an hour before being brought back aboard. After proving the suit could withstand ocean conditions, Paul's adventures grew more and more adventurous. In June 28, 1875, using only his rubber suit and a paddle, Paul was able to cross the English Channel from Cape Grisez to Faro Bay, Kent. He did this with only 3 meals of strong green tea and beef sandwiches. Later that year, Paul would spend several days paddling 430 miles down the Rhine, again only using the rubber suit as a form of transportation. Going even further, he spent 6 days traveling 400 miles on the Danby River later that year. Paul would continue to push his limits, including a 2,342-mile journey from Oil City, Pennsylvania to the Gulf of Mexico, taking an astonishing 80 days to complete. And in 1881, Paul completed his longest voyage when he traveled 3,580 miles from Cedar Creek, Montana to St. Louis, Missouri. After several more years of small adventures and public displays of his rubber suit, Paul went on to start the first permanent amusement park in 1894. This was Paul Boyton's Water Chutes, located in Chicago. The next year, he would open Sea Lion Park in Coney Island, New York. Paul Boyton inspired a revolution in maritime safety, and almost 145 years later, the survival suit is still in use today. Paul's adventures even inspired author Jules Verne, who used the rubber survival suit to save the hero and his 3 companions in the book Tribulations of a Chinaman in China. And that, my friends, is a brief summary of the first true rubber celebrity, Captain Paul Boyton. If you're interested in learning more about Paul's rubber adventures, I recommend the book Roughing It in Rubber by Colleen Sullivan. I'll also include a link to a very well-written blog about Captain Boyton and some of his adventures. For now, thanks for watching.